Why are you looking at me funny? Is there something on my face? Oh, it's because I have a gun and a non-gun video. Better? It couldn't be this giant box I'm wearing. That would just be weird. Hey guys, Compulsion84 here, and today I'm showing you the Domo Kun costume I made some time ago. I'm by no means a costume maker. This is the first and only one I made. I made this 6 years ago for Halloween because I thought Domokuns were kind of funny. It took me a while to make this because I'm a complete novice. I had to learn how to sew and everything else. It probably took me somewhere in the 30 to 40 hour range. But anyways, what I'm going to do is show you the costume itself, kind of how I built it. But again, this is by no means going to say this is the best way to do it, but I'll show you what I did as a complete novice with this, and maybe you can figure out a better way to do this if you want to ever make one yourself, or if you're just curious how I did it, or if you just want to see this completely ridiculous costume. So I'm 6'2", and with this costume, I think I probably stand at about 7 and change feet tall. I stand about 6'10" in this costume, so I don't clear doorways. I can't sit down in it. It's quite a cumbersome mess, to be honest. I took it to a couple parties and had fun with it. I went to a casino for a party. I was promptly banned from the dance floor, but I could kind of mull about around the bar. But it was a mess because it was crowded on Halloween and everything else. So what I'll do is I'll show each of the components of this thing, show you how I built it, but you should be able to easily reverse engineer what I did. Alright, so first things first is getting this off because it's kind of heavy and it's hot. Alright, so the base of this is a red shirt that matches the inner felt. And then I've got 2 arms, also made out of this kind of fuzzy felt I found at like Joann Fabrics or something like that. And what I did is because I need to be able to move around and do stuff, I just sewed open flaps where I just kind of cut the material and then sewed it onto the back so that I had access to my hands so I could eat and drink and somewhat function like a human being. Unfortunately, because of the boxy shape of it, you're kind of severely limited in your mobility with your elbows. So eating and drinking was rather difficult. One of the ways I actually got around that, I planned ahead enough. I put a camelback on my back. I'll show you a picture here. So I could put some rum and coke in it so I could actually, drink. I stitched them along the inside edge. Let's see. I intentionally left this big wide piece of fabric so that I could slip these over my shoulders. And come on. That's the wrong arm. That's the left arm. This isn't perfect because you can see the brown inside the costume. If I would have had more time and frankly thought about it when I designed it, I would have put red plaid or red felt over the brown so that the inside matched with the interior red light costume. But I went with it this way with these large flaps of fabric so I could safety pin them down here to keep it on tight so when I was moving around it didn't come off. Again, you could, if you wanted to really kick your game up, you could connect them in the back so that they kind of slip them on together more like a jacket, and that way you wouldn't they wouldn't kind of come off or move around as much. And as you just saw, the costume, the main part of the costume itself kind of slips over the head. As you can kind of see from the side, I put in some shoulder straps. So the way I keep the center of my body is on the shoulder straps. Now the main problem is I just affixed those to the box with duct tape over a few uses over 2 or 3 nights, and then it's been in storage for a few years. It started to sag, so it now sits about 2 inches shorter than it used to. I used to stand just about 7 feet tall in it. Now it's like I said, 6'10", maybe 6'9". Also, I had a lot of drunk people kind of hammering on it and messing around with it. So I would say the shoulder attachment with duct tape was definitely a weakness of this design. The other problems with the box, which I'll show you in the video, is it was not, I actually used some U-Haul boxes. I think they were mediums. They were not the right dimensions. So this is actually 2 boxes. If you stacked them too wide, they'd be way too big. So I cut them down, so rather than them being about this wide, they're maybe this wide. So now I've got a major structural weak point because I've got two boxes that are duct taped together. I thought about using a refrigerator box, but those dimensions were again too far off. This thing is unwieldy as it is, and if I were to use anything bigger, I wouldn't be able to wear it or get around, or the proportions would be completely off. If you could find a box that fits you as it is, so you don't have to cut them and combine them, that would be much better. I actually put in some kind of cardboard reinforcements to reinforce both of those joints, because after wearing it and after drunk people kind of pounding on the top of it and the sides of it, it started to bow in. So what I'll do now is walk through each of the tiny little bits of the costume and all the sub-assemblies of it and tell you exactly how I did it. So as I said before, the exoskeleton of this thing is two cardboard boxes that are spliced together. I used 4 different kinds of felt. I got these at just like a normal craft store. I think it was a Joann Fabrics, but these are by no means exclusive to them. I got a black for the eyes, a brown for the legs, arms, and to cover the box itself. The red, I actually lined the entire inside of the box because, you know, that's you gotta have its mouth. And then I used the white for the teeth, and you can tell I've got kind of a lot of extra fabric. The brown stuff, I think I got a break by buying like a whole roll, or I don't remember, you buy fabric by the yard? I don't know. I didn't explain what I was doing when I was talking to the nice old lady at Joann Fabrics, because she would have looked at me like a crazy person. And since I still have the end of this fabric, if you want to do this and you like the color and the kind of plushy, felty fabric I used, it is called Plush Felt. It is made by the Kunin Group, Kunin. It's labeled as chocolate color, 45 inches, I think that's the width. It's labeled as plush felt 10 yards. For the eyes, I simply got 2 layers of black felt to give it a little bit of thickness, and I just put them down and stitched around the edge of it. I went straight through the box. These boxes were like a medium to heavy weight, so it was hard to stitch through. Using a thimble or something else to protect your thumb would really help. My hands were just killing me because I didn't have one of those when I did this. Every time I forced this through, it was just, it got brutal by the end. I could have raised the eyes a little bit, but when I pulled up a bunch of pictures, the actual real costumes didn't really have raised eyes. Before I go any further, I should probably cover the brown felt of the box. So what I did is, it's actually got a top flap going around the edge of it. So along the long portion of it, I've got one vertical seam going the whole way, and then on the top part, I have a seam going along the upper perimeter to kind of sew the flap on. And then the bottom edges weren't actually sewn on. I could have connected them. I can't remember if I didn't sew them down because I completely ran out of time when I was making this, or if it was because I wanted it to hang down and cover up my belt and kind of be more of a flowing look. I guess this gets down to personal preference. No one would ever see this cardboard edge because you're always going to be standing up. All right, and then the rest of the insides, or I should say the rest of the exterior of this thing is, the teeth are just white felt. Again, I used 2 layers, and I wanted them to have a little bit of a profile, so I just stitched them together, and I stitched it on like a V over the teeth. I thought about putting stuffing in there to kind of give them like a 3D look, but again, the videos and everything else, they looked kind of flat. They didn't have a lot of like stuffing or bulk to them, so I just made them flat, and they actually they keep themselves upright. And above or below the teeth, I just cut out a rectangular square material above the pointy parts. So there's actually a seam sewn on the back side, or I should say the inside of the box, sewing these white teeth in. I don't remember what kind of sewing or seam that I used. I learned a few basic, ways to sew or tie knots, did this, and then I forgot it a couple months later because I never used it again. Alright, moving on to the inside, and this part is much harder to show because this is a complete costume I'm doing this after the fact. So all I did was I used several layers of duct tape and I put sticky side together so that there was no more adhesive poking out. And I used those to make straps that go down over my shoulders. So I then used the duct tape to stick it to the back side and the front sides of the box, and then I taped over the edges against the inside edge of the box to secure them. This was one of the parts that started to fail, and every time I wear it, I had to go through and reapply some of the duct tape. this was this is one of the big flaws of the costume, but eventually it's going to get to the point where I would have to completely redo the straps entirely. If you were going to make this more comfortable or do a better, more professional job, you could use some sort of actual straps like from a book bag or something else. It would probably be a lot more comfortable, and you could actually stitch the material into the box itself, and then that way it would be very secure versus my way, which is kind of crappy, to be honest. So that's how I mounted the straps, which is pretty straightforward. The next thing I did is I just cut holes in the sides for my arms to stick out of. Again, when you're doing this, make sure you mock it up, because my mobility is hindered. But if I wouldn't have done a little bit of mock-ups and a little bit of planning and measurements, I wouldn't be able to do anything. So I can sort of like get my arms in front of me in it, but if you weren't to like do a couple measurements and made it too wide or too thick, you would be completely helpless. And what I did for the armholes is I've got the final armhole right here, but I cut the fabric kind of in the middle in a rough X-shaped pattern. So then I could fold the fabric edges over the cardboard edge and have a nice clean edge, and then I just stitched right around the perimeter with some brown thread, which was pretty easy. The next part is the pants. Again, I was not good at this at all. I went with a very simple design. I just made some rough pant shapes out of felt. What I would have done if I would have had more time and had the materials to do it was actually made these kind of like suspenders, and I could have integrated that with a box suspension, but that didn't work. So what I did is I just clipped these through my belt loops in my jeans or whatever pants I was wearing to keep them up. So for the pants, they're actually two pieces of fabric rolled together because I couldn't get fabric big enough to make these out of one piece. So I guess you kind of stitch these like normal pants. I don't know. I'm not a seamstress, but I stitched up the butt to join the pieces together, and then the front, like I said before, I safety pin whenever I wear it, and the legs, I just rolled them around and stitched up the inside of the leg, and then I just went to the bottom. I didn't cuff these or anything. If you wanted to, again, step your game up a little bit, you could have cuffed them, but I left a kind of loose bit of material so I could fit these over my shoes, and it covers like, I don't know, 50 or 75% of them. I didn't make footies for this or anything. You easily could do that, or I guess you'd call them booties, but yeah, it was I guess a good enough solution that pretty much did the job. This thing is dusty or something. It's gonna kill me. The only wear damage I got with this is I blew out one of the seams in the legs of the pants, and I don't know what I'm doing with sewing. I'm an engineer. This is not my forte. I covered all the outside bits. What else? So the whole inside of this thing is actually covered in the red felt. Just so, it's supposed to be the mouth. The mouth is this red color, so I got this very kind of bright red color. This shirt I'm wearing right now was the closest I had to it. If you really wanted to do it up, you could have made a felt shirt, or I would have bought a shirt that color matched it, but this is all I had in my closet. If I were to do it again, I might use brown on some of the edges. I think this is ultimately using red on the interior was much better, because it's supposed to be red when you look in the mouth. The shoulder straps, that are made out of duct tape, are covered with red fabric. And what I did with those shoulder strap covers is I simply cut it to length, folded it over, and then I sewed along some of the edges, and then I think I safety pinned the ends, so if I needed to fix it, I could pull it back a little bit. You'll notice there's a weird flap in the back where the red fabric is cut back, because it was completely covering the inside with no seam. When the shoulder strap started pulling out, I had to modify it. Well, I had to do repairs, and I wanted to do the least, I guess, noticeable repair, and I figured out, well, behind you no one's gonna see because you're obviously wearing the costume. So I cut a little U-shaped piece of the red fabric so I could get back there and reinforce the straps with duct tape, but that's why that section's there. And like I said, the fabric doesn't cover the interior of the front face, it covers the interior right, interior left, and the back. The top is also bare cardboard on the inside because no one's gonna see that. And the interior red fabric is simply attached with some brown thread, like most of the stitching on this. I got some heavyweight strong thread, and then I just kind of stitched along some of the vertical seams to make sure it would stay in place. The bottom actually isn't stitched in. Again, I think that was a time constraint. If I had more time to do this, I would have put like a bottom brown seam to keep the red along the edges, and to also keep the brown part kind of folded up, and I don't know if gusseted is the term, not gusseted, but I wanted to fold it up to have kind of a smooth seam on the bottom. I just would have to make sure the pants wouldn't need that overhang. The other things I learned from this build is using a box as the exoskeleton, I guess, or the main support of this thing might work for a couple of times, but if you wanted this to last a lot longer, you could definitely go with a better choice. One of the things I thought about using was that kind of plastic corrugated board. Similar to cardboard, that plastic board might work better. One of the designs I had sketched up had a kind of flap on the back side of it or the top of it, so I could collapse this thing, which would make storing it a heck of a lot easier. The problem was I was worried about rigidity, which ultimately I'm glad I didn't put it in there, because without some sort of frame or skeleton, it would have collapsed. I did think about using a PVC frame. If I was to do this again, I would probably do that. It would add a little bit of weight, but it would drastically help, keep the shape of it and make a much better costume if you wanted to use this for a long period of time. You could easily make a rectangular PVC frame on the top and bottom, and then use support bars to connect them, and that would also help you connect the shoulder supports better, so you'd have a better, more rigid attachment point, and it would also potentially be more comfortable, especially if you figured out a better suspension system than it just sitting on your shoulders. But that's what I figured out. So yeah, that's all of my Domokun suit build. Again, I'm putting this up because I figured people might think this was fun or it was a neat thing. Also, I figured if you wanted to build one of these things, it might give you a point to start. Believe it or not, I did think about the design of this and sketch up a few different variants. Some of it was a time constraint, some of it was a skill constraint, but if you were to do this, hopefully you can go through this video and figure out a way to make an even better costume than I did, or maybe figure out a way to get this stupid thing to be collapsible so you don't have this refrigerator box size cardboard monster sitting in your closet or storage unit or whatever, because trying to store this is not fun. I mean, what are you supposed to do with this? Ugh, it's a ridiculous thing, and as much as I like it and as cool as it is, it's not exactly practical in an apartment. But yeah, so that is my Domokun costume, my first and only costume, cosplay, whatever that I've ever made. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Compulsion84, and I'm not normally making absolutely ridiculous Domokun or Halloween costumes. Normally I make content about guns, gaming, and gadgets. Please take a look around my channel, subscribe if you enjoy it, and I hope I see you next time.